Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to St Peter Mancroft. Please carry on visiting the church and or browsing and buying Christmas cards, and welcome to those watching on live stream. We also welcome the production team of the London Film Orchestra, who have been setting up behind me, as you see, for 2 concerts today and 2 tomorrow. We have a short weekly reflection here each Wednesday, part of our programme of 1 o'clock service and prayer events on each weekday. Do see our newsletter in church or online for more details. My name's Catherine Waddams. I'm one of the lay ministers here, and today I want to talk about managing expectations. I wonder what you expected from today's budget. Rachel Reeves is, I believe, on her feet in the House of Commons as I speak, though you probably know all her plans if you're watching later. Budget day has at last arrived. It seems to have been a long time coming. These national budgets, laying out the government's plans for collecting revenue through the various taxes which we pay as individuals and businesses and other entities, and the spending which is anticipated, are always a difficult balance because of competing needs. Should we spend money on education, or the NHS, or winter fuel allowances, or higher pensions, or subsidies to bus fares? A bit like any of our household budgets, really, though with very different constraints and, of course, much wider implications. As an economist, I've sometimes been invited to comment on local radio stations about past budgets. I have always excused myself, as many so-called experts do, by saying this really isn't my area, which is true. So I certainly shan't start offering views on a budget which is only half declared. Except perhaps it's more than that, because this year we seem to have known an awful lot about the difficulties and some of the details ahead of time. It's no longer the sort of occasion where the government keeps everything very close to its chest to reveal on the day itself as a great surprise, though I did see Rachel Reeves with her red box earlier on. Quite the contrary, we've heard a lot about black holes, and unpopular decisions have already been announced. It feels in real contrast to Edward's invitation a couple of weeks ago in this slot to look out for the opportunity of unexpected events. Rather, the government's policy has been to prepare us all for bad news. First, it axed the winter fuel allowance, though I personally support its removal from people like myself who don't need it, as long as it is redirected so that people who do need extra support with their fuel bills get more. And of course, that's easier said than done in the real world. On the other hand, one benefit of making it dependent on certain other benefits is that people are claiming more of those certain other benefits, which is good for them, but perhaps not necessarily for the government's balance sheet. Other changes have also been pre-announced: the lower subsidy for bus fares, i.e. the higher fares, increases in employers' national insurance contributions, increases in the minimum wage, especially for younger workers. Very good news for low-paid workers, but challenging in the short term for some employers, especially in tourism and hospitality, which form a large part of our local economy here. And we have heard of some additional support for vital services, though the government has also been trying to contain expectations on the spending side. There isn't enough money to solve all the problems in the NHS and the care sector and schools and universities, so we have been discouraged from getting our hopes up. Of course, journalists and indeed the opposition parties are right to ask whether the election campaign pulled its punches in terms of likely possibilities after Labour was elected. But there's also an inevitability about grand ideas being more difficult to put into practice than to get over in an election soundbite. So the government have been peddling quite a lot of doom and gloom, and I cannot remember a budget being so widely trailed as our expectations have been managed downwards, both in terms of potential tax pain and limited immediate improvement in public services. Expectations management is nothing new. We find plenty of it in the Bible. Jesus himself is very clear on the challenges and costs of being his follower, as well as the joys and benefits. He didn't pull his punches that the disciples would face torture and death for their faith, and many of them did. He often spoke of his own death and the resurrection which would follow, something which must have seemed totally baffling for the disciples at the time, but of course makes sense to us in retrospect after the event. In reading the Bible, we need to remember that most of it describes events which happened decades, often centuries, before they were written about. The writers had the benefit of backcasting, telling stories in the light of later events. And we also view events in the light of what followed, including how earlier Christians have interpreted them. But that perspective and very familiarity of the stories may lead us to miss some of the nuances. Take Christmas, for example, fast approaching as we select and buy our Christmas cards. And we see two different stories managing our expectations of Jesus' life. Diarmaid MacCulloch, in his engaging and informative talk here on Friday as part of the Norwich Book Festival and trailing his new book, reminded us how our traditional Christmas images, including most church cribs and probably several of the cards on sale at the back of the church, combine these two stories: the shepherds from Luke's account, the wise people from Matthew's. Diarmaid pointed out that both agreed on and are centrally concerned with Joseph not being Jesus' father. But the detail they provide leads us to expect very different things of this infant and his unorthodox birth. Matthew tells it from Joseph's perspective, and the wise visitors from the east, as well as Herod's determination to kill the baby, suggesting that Jesus' life would be recognized by the scholarly and wise, and that he would be a threat to and be threatened by the powerful. While Luke's account, which we'll hear in a few weeks in our 3-year cycle of gospel narratives, focuses on Mary and her family's experience, with visits from angels to humble teenage shepherds, and by those same shepherds to the manger, perhaps anticipating Jesus' interaction with ordinary people. With the benefit of hindsight, we can see that both these perspectives are true, which I suppose is why we're happy to combine wise men, shepherds, angels, and animals in our visualization of that Bethlehem stable. As our own expectations are shaped by these pieces of narrative management by the gospel writers, we have the opportunity to explore what those familiar stories lead us to expect about our faith and about how we live it. The whole combined cast of nativity actors feature in U.A. Fanthorpe's poem, What the Donkey Saw. Ironically, donkeys are not included in either nativity narrative. Their traditional role probably originates many centuries later from St. Francis. But all 4 Gospels describe Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, as Fanthorpe's donkey anticipated. What the Donkey Saw by U.A. Fanthorpe. No room at the inn, of course, and not that much in the stable, what with the shepherds, Magi, Mary, Joseph, the heavenly host, not to mention the baby using our manger as a cot. You couldn't have squeezed another cherubim in for love or money. Still, in spite of the overcrowding, I did my best to make them feel wanted. I could see the baby and I would be going places together. So I hope we may each find a way, both of managing our own expectations with hope and realism, and looking out for those unexpected opportunities. And after all the government's management of our expectations, I wonder how you feel about the budget. For you, for your family, for your friends, for our society and nation as a whole. Many thanks for listening to this reflection. and every blessing for the rest of your day and for your expectations of the coming days and weeks.